All right.
All right, great.
Thank you for doing
Well,
this, Deborah.
hi to everyone. And I'm not in my studio right now. I'm in my home office, which is why I have, funny dresses up on the wall and now all my artwork. I'm hoping that I can do my demos in the future at my studio, but my Wi-Fi is a little bit, not perfect there. And so I don't want to jeopardize the flow here. But we're working on that. So, all right. So I'm going to start with this little PowerPoint I've done. And we're going to go through a few things and then I'll talk to you a little bit about materials and pastels and then do a little demo for you. I typically am kind of a slow artist, and so I don't usually finish an entire demo. I mean, an entire piece in a demo, but you'll definitely get, well into it. And then at the end, we're going to just take a couple minutes to talk about framing and how to take care of your pastel once you're finished with it. A little fix, a little framing, and that kind of stuff. Okay,
That's
so let me share my screen here with you. Okay, can you all see my
yes.
screen here?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is one of my pieces here. This is a sunflower that I did called Hey Sunshine. And I did this piece last year, and it's going to be in the Pastel Journal of Pastel 100 coming up here in February as an honorable mention. So that's a pretty cool thing that I'm excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. So, and you can see here, the scale of these is a little hard to tell, but this is, I work fairly large. This is 41 by 41. And what I do is I have a pastel paper that I have my framer dry mount to gator board. And so it gives me a really nice stiff surface that I can work on when it's this size. If you're just working on paper, it can be a little tricky because you're always working with the paper kind of rolling or buckling, that kind of thing. But when it's dry mounted to the gator board, it's a lightweight surface, but it's very, very helpful for working in this kind of scale.
And
Okay.
why do you have him do it? Is it a big process?
Yeah, and he's kind of a perfectionist, and I kind of just love it when I can let somebody help me and I don't have to do everything. You know how it is. So he's great, and I'll take a roll of paper to him, and then he can do that, and I'm set for, a number of pieces. So he's right in Palo Alto, and he's great. All right, so there I am at my studio. I'm working on a piece here called Rose Crush. This is kind of in the beginning of the piece. And this just gives a little bit about my background. And I studied with Wayne Thiebaud, as we mentioned, and Roland Peterson, who's had a very long, long career as well. And then I worked as a creative director and designer and illustrator before becoming a full-time artist. And I worked as an illustrator for a food manufacturing company, and I did all the branding and packaging design for them. And we used my illustrations for that packaging. So that was a great training ground for working in pastels. Not only did I have a deadline, but I also had access to, they kind of let me buy whatever I wanted to. So that was really fun in order to, do the work I wanted to do. And so when I left that position, I felt like I had a very good kind of foundation in pastels. I've been teaching pastels and workshops, and I teach currently for the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. And I'll be going there this summer to teach an in-person workshop, and all that good stuff. So, and as it says here at the bottom, I really love to work in large scale. I think that's just really, really fun, and I love to explore the colors in that large format and just really bring the viewer into the piece. So here's a poppy piece I did as a commission. And one of the things that you can see what I've done here is I kind of have a macro view of these, which is something that Georgia O'Keeffe would do in her work. I saw an exhibit of her work when I was about 9 years old at the Young Museum in San Francisco. And I just fell so in love with her work. My grandmother had gardens when I was young, and I really enjoyed looking at her flowers and all her different subject matter. So I've just studied her over the years. And a couple of years ago, I sent a proposal to that museum to teach there. And they said, we would love that if you want to do that. So that was kind of a dream come true for me. And so there you go. You never know what's in store, right?
Is
So
that
anyway, I said,
is that the one in Taos, the little
yeah, yeah, it is. And it's in Taos, and they have a whole museum dedicated to her, plus tours of her home, where she did her
yeah,
work. It's really fun to see.
it's a pretty
Uh,
big place. I've been there.
yeah. Okay, and then like I said, this is a macro view, so you're going really kind of down into the detail of the flowers. You're looking at, I try to make a dynamic sort of composition here, even though this is 2 flowers. You can see that there's a lot of movement within this piece. There's a lot of movement within the flowers and the petals, and the different marks that I've used here to indicate some of the striations on the petals. And then the background that I've made a little bit more abstract, not as much tight detail on that, but and then using the negative and positive space, you can see here it's kind of this blue shining through the leaves and reflections. And that is a nice complement to the orange and the yellows that I've used. So cooler colors, warmer colors to add interest to your piece. All those are important to keep in mind when you're developing your artwork. And here are my materials. Pastel paper is a UArt, which is a very sort of revolutionary type of pastel paper that had come out in the past few years. It's a very, very fine sandpaper, almost feeling, and they have it in different grades. So typically for my work, I use an 800 grade, which is very smooth, but you can use 250 grade, which has a grit, more of a grit to it. And then you'll see more of your that grit come through and give texture to your work. So it kind of depends on what you're looking to do. I have friends that they work that way in their pastels for instance, landscapes and things. And then the soft
Is that
pastel,
YOU art or U art?
UArt. I should have had it listed here, but
That's
it's
okay. Letter U art.
yeah, A-art, yeah. And the soft pastels, so these are not oil pastels, these are soft pastels. And you can see here looking at my tray of pastels, I have many, many, many pastels, and it's never enough. There's always more pastels to buy and try out and enjoy. So I have these listed at the end here, some of these different kinds I use. Some have more interesting texture, some are very smooth and creamy, some have just, super brilliant color to them. Pastels, in my opinion, have the most brilliant colors because it's a medium that doesn't have very much a binder to it. So when I say binder, it's like the thing that holds the pigment together. So watercolor, oil paint, acrylics, you have the water, you have the plastic kind of consistency, you have tempera's egg, all those things are used to hold pigment together. Whereas with pastels, it's just a single stick, right? So you have a stick of color that's held together with, I think it's like a gum arabic, and it's compressed. So it's almost like a pure pigment. And because of that, you get that brilliant color. Kneaded eraser, X-Acto knife. I use a graphite pencil for my original little sketch, alcohol for the underpainting. pastel pencils. So I have different pastel pencils I'll show you that I love. Because this work is a little smaller scale, I'll be using those for some of the tighter finishes. And these are Conte of Paris are my favorite right now, because they have a texture that's very similar to regular pastels. So they don't feel like a pencil, they feel like a very fine pastel. White charcoal pencils are really great because they will give you a very clean, sharp line. And my white charcoal pencil does not seem to be here. So white charcoal pencils can give you, this one is a white pastel pencil. Oh, here's the charcoal. So this is a pretty used one, but you can see here the white tip. So what this is, a very opaque white. So a lot of times when you're doing a flower or leaves, there's an edge to them that will catch light. And so it's nice sometimes to go back into your drawing towards the end and kind of put that in those light touches, because it will, of course, bring all the highlights, bring something so alive to the viewer. Mask is always important to use for pastel work. I'm not going to wear one right now, but typically I always wear a mask when I'm working. And I have a lot of ventilation as well. I have a big garage door that goes up. Paper towel for tapping dust off. I'm going to show you about that. I have Winsor & Newton barrier cream. So if you can look here, you can see that on my iPhone. And this is called Art Guard. And this is a barrier cream that helps prevent the pastel colors to stain your hands too much. So it's kind of just a protectant. It's kind of a waxy cream, and it will dry, and it helps just keep your fingers and your fingernails a little bit protected, since you are working with those directly in your hands. And then a fixative for the finished piece. This is the favorite one I have, called Shemiki. And this one is relatively non-toxic. I still use it outside, but it's very mild, and it's very fast drying, and it fixes the pastels without flattening the colors too much. So that's an important part of the end product. You don't want to use fix on your painting that's going to knock the highlights down, or put too much shellac kind of surface to it. So that's important that you don't use just any old fixative. You want to use something specifically for pastels.
Does this also give you more tooth when you use the fixative?
Well, what it could do is, if you're working on a pastel and let's say you've overworked a section and can't really get any more color on that particular area because the tooth is filled, you can spray with a little fixative and you can go over it again. And so let's say you have an area that is too dark and you just cannot put any light color over it. You can spray with a little fixative and go over it again. Not like too much, but it will give you enough so you can cover that area. Okay, so working with pastels, we're going to think about a couple of things, starting with the drawing. And what you really want to do is think about how your flower, so we're talking about flowers, and I'm going to do a demo here, and Thrilium, I think it's what it's called, which is sort of a heart-shaped Hawaiian flower with heart-shaped leaves that are very pretty. And it's important to look at your subject matter and really sort of figure out how it's put together. You know what I mean? So how many petals come together for the center part? What are the leaves like? How is the light bouncing off of those leaves? How is the flower formed in terms of its shadows and highlights? You just kind of want to study all that before you dive in. I just find it really helpful to try to really understand how it's built. Then we're going to talk about mark making and managing the dust. do a little line drawing. So the line drawing is big shapes, not detail. That's not what the drawing is for. It's just to kind of map it out. And then we'll do an underpainting and look at 3 to 4 tonal values. So when you squint your eye and you look at something, you can pull out the tonal values of it. Now, when you look at this red rose, for instance, you can see there's a dark, you sort of look at your subject matter and find what is the darkest area of that piece. And that's going to be your darkest tone. And then you want to work up to your lighter tones. So you can see here, I've got light tones in the area where the aqua and the white are used in the left-hand side. And then the leaves that are behind the rose are those darker tonal values. And I'm even depicting some of that with a dark purple. And so that's going to give your artwork a richness to it. You're going to really try to push all those tones. And I have also a little grayscale, which I'll show when I'm working. And this is really helpful to see. It's in black and white, but it's really helpful to see how this might apply to your piece, because all of those tones going from the dark to the light is going to give your piece a richness and a beauty and a three-dimensionality. And then for the alcohol washes, we'll go ahead and do those large areas and just sort of the mid-tones. And then the fourth part is layering and building the darker tones and the highlights. So you kind of work down into the darker areas with darker colors and light on the areas that have the highlights and that you want to bring out. So you're really thinking about, again, your positive and negative spaces. So for this rose, for instance, the blue spaces are very important in the way that they move your eye through the piece, as well as the depiction of the rose itself and the leaves, the light leaves and the dark leaves in the background. And then, of course, the shape of the rose itself that has a dynamicness to it. You can see there's two kind of strong X's in this piece as far as the composition goes, with the lines of the buds and the rose and the leaves, the veins of the leaves. Pushing yourself to make it the best, obviously. So a lot of times what I find is when my students, sometimes they want to quit too soon. You got to really hang in there with pastels, because they will reward you for it in the end. But I think typically what people might do is start it and then throw in some highlights, and then I'm kind of finished. But really, it's important, like I said, to think about all that tonality that you want to put in there. And typically for like this rose, I would go around and around. I move my work in sort of a rotation. And then I get a different sort of perspective on it. And it helps me really think about the composition in abstract as well as in the reality that I'm trying to bring it into it. Because again, that's going to make your work stronger and more interesting in the end. Some artists work just from like top to bottom. And that might work for them, but that is not good for me. Like I need to kind of be working on the whole thing at one time to really get it to the point that I want. All right. And then we're going to talk a little bit about protecting the pastels, fixative, storage tips, and framing with the spacers. Okay. So all of those things I'm just going to touch upon real quick. And then these are the resources of places that I've gotten my work, my supplies. And like I said, I'll send this to you guys so you'll have this to look it up. Dakota Pastels is a great pastel resource where I get a lot of my pieces. I mean, a lot of my supplies. They're sort of definitively for pastels. And one of the really fun things they have is you can buy sort of a suite of different sorts of pastels in a color range. So you could go on there and buy like a green, and they'll give you 7 or 8 different kinds of pastels in green. And that's a super fun thing because you can try them out and sort of get the feel of what pastel you might like to work with more,
Different brands.
Different brands, right? So typically you can't buy really high-end pastels at like a lot of stores. They just don't carry them.
Yeah.
So you might have to dig a little deeper. And like I said, this place is sort of the pastel mecca. All right, do you guys have any questions about any of that?
So many.
I know we went through a lot, but we'll be going
Yeah.
through it step by step. Yeah, Sydney?
I I was reading about your presentation today, and I think that's where I saw that you had 3 colors made for yourself. Is that
Wow, wouldn't that be
was
great? No, I don't think, no, I
that
haven't done.
wasn't you? I was reading, maybe I was reading a different artist. There was an
Yeah,
artist about pastels that had
that would be
like,
fun.
Kitty
Yeah,
Wallace,
that would be great.
who
Kitty
was
Wallace,
that?
who makes a I think she passed away, but her children still make the pastel sanded paper, Kitty Wallace paper. She also had a that you could buy the pigment and mix your own color and make your own pastels.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
wow.
a way to learn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kitty with a K, Kitty Wallace.
Waller, you said?
Wallace.
Wallace. Okay, interesting. I did not know
Wallace. I'm
anything
not
about
sure they still have that. They definitely have the paper, but and you can hose that stuff down. It's very sanded though.
Okay.
And she
Well,
used big pastels, floral, but not with alcohol.
okay. Well, the alcohol is really just sort of, like I said, the underpainting. So you're going to build on top of that. It's not like you're ever going to really see it later on. It's just to give you sort of a roadmap. And it's just like I said, helpful to give you sort of a little bit of a shortcut, especially if you're using a lot of heavy greens and things, because that is a lot of buildup of a dark dust, and the darkness can kind of creep into the lightness of the light colors and sort of muddy it all up. You know what I mean?
How do
So
you get such a velvet look? Is that just your technique of doing it then?
yeah, I think so. And a lot of layering, a lot of going back over it to, like with this magnolia here, you can see there's a lot of different colors in the magnolia petals. You
Yeah.
know, so I've got blues in there, I've got a lot of cream tones, warm,
Do you
warm.
use a stump then, or your finger to kind of rub it, or
Probably just my finger. Yeah, I have used some pan pastel tools.
oh
So
yeah,
like little tiny sponges. You just
yeah,
have to be super careful, because a lot of times when you use tools like that, it ends up lifting the pastel instead of like smoothing it out. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
So it's just a lot of practice, to be honest with you. I mean, when you work, I can't remember, there's a saying, if you do something 10,000 times, you're an
Yeah,
expert.
yeah.
So, so that's what I feel like with my
I have that written
pastel.
down somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, wow, yeah. So, it is a medium that is definitely challenging, but again, the rewards of the beautiful colors, you just, you can't surpass them. Okay, so I'm gonna close this out for now, and we're gonna go look at the actual my board here, and you guys can see this, and this is
Yeah.
a big image for you. Okay, and what I have here, I have some scrap paper. It's always good to have some scrap paper when you're working with pastels, so you can get a true read on a color. You can see this is sort of a buff color, and that can affect the color of the pastels. You can use all kinds of different colored papers, but I think I like to work on the buff the best at this point in time. Who knows what the future will bring? I was thinking about buying a roll of black paper and working with that for fun. But this gives you an idea of the colors. And so one of the things that's important to think about with the pastels is your how you make your marks and how you apply the color. So I'm just cleaning this off a little bit. A lot of times pastels will gather color from other pastels around it, and you'll get flakes of different colors. So you want to
You
keep
don't
it
keep it in rice or anything?
pure. No, I don't. I probably should, but you know, I love to see all those colors in the corner of my studio. So anyway, with this one, you can see there's a broad edge to it that you can use to apply the color. And there's another, you know, this edge, you've got your more pointed edge. Some pastels will come in a round form like this, and you can get a small line with that, or again, you can get a very wide line. When you're applying the pastels, a lot of times I find that my students will go like this and try to cover a large amount of space, when really you want to take that side and just really lay it on there, so you can fill up the tooth and you can start to work with it. If you have a small amount and you're trying to blend it, it can be very difficult to blend into another color unless you really have a good amount of color on there. So that's just something to think about as you're working. Don't be afraid of really laying the color on there, because that's what you want to do to start your drawing. People are a little timid, I think, is the problem. And also, don't worry about taking off the labels of the pastels. So this will give you more access to, like I said, that broader kind of application, or also to break them if you feel like, you know, you want to use it in a smaller, there's nothing wrong with that either. You know, just they are a tool and you want to take advantage of all the different aspects of it that it can bring
Exactly.
to.
It's a tool. Yeah.
It's a tool.
Not precious.
Right. Now with the pencils, you know, you're going to bring this in to do more of the detail work, like I said, you know, your edges perhaps, and then, you know, just your gradual layer, perhaps that'll help. Typically what I do is I start broad with the pastels and the alcohol wash, and then you're going to bring in your pencils to start detailing the work, or maybe give yourself a sharper edge somewhere where there's a sharper edge, that kind of thing. You don't want to start right off with your pencils, you know, in a big way. You know what I mean? You want to start with the broader pastels and then dive into the detail. It's like anything, you want to, it's like building a house, right? You're sort of like, I'm going to select the site. I'm going to, you know, mark off the space.
Foundation first before,
right.
the
And then, you know, you're going to pick out the finishes for the kitchen sink, right? You don't do that right away. You don't, you know, or you can maybe have it in the back of your mind, but you're going to go big and then, you know, detail.
You don't draw with them and then try to fill in like a color crayon.
Well, so I'll do a sketch, but again, the sketch will be light. So I'll start with that now. What I'm also going to show you here, just really quickly before I start that, is, oh, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh, so when you have a lot of dust on your board, typically I work on an easel, so my work is kind of slanted like this, and I have a tray that catches all my dust, and I wipe it down quite a bit as I'm working the tray and the table, so I keep that dust down at bay. But when you're working flat on a smaller piece, you're going to get you know, a fair amount of dust, and there's some pastels that will give you more dust than other. Typically, if they're harder, they'll have a lot more dust to them, just because the surface is you're having to rub a little bit more and it falls off. But so you can see here when I've got this darker one, maybe this is a really soft one. This one, you can see some of the dust is kind of piling on there, you know, you can see it's sort of piling on. So you're just going to want to take a paper towel like this, and you're going to just tap it like that. And you can see some of that dust is falling off to keep my surface from getting too much dust, and then the dust is going to spread out to my other colors. So I keep that up here, And then I have a paper towel here that I'm working from for my actual art that's going to catch stray things too. Okay, so that's a way to kind of work through the problems. And you just want to always have a rag too that you're going to be wiping your hands on. The other thing is I have these wipes. I'll have like a wipe too. And if you're working with a dark color and you're going to be going back to using whites or something, ideally you're kind of planning this ahead, but you don't want to take these fingers and kind of rub it into the white because it'll mark up that area. So I wipe it just a little bit with this wet wipe, excuse me, and this helps keep my hands from doing that. Okay. So
Also, it helps that come off because of the stuff you put on your
yes,
berrying.
yeah, the berry, yeah. Okay, so this image is one I took at my studio, and I like to work a lot of times from real flowers. But you have to take photos of them at some point because if I'm working unplanned and doing sketches, I'll take photos and maybe go back to my studio and finish the piece up. Or I might decide that the flower that I'm working from is kind of dying and I need to this is getting kind of out of whack here. And I need to make sure I have it as a reference, but you're never going to get as much detail as you do from the actual flower or the actual scene. There's a light to it, and it's like every step you take away from that further and further sort of diminishes it. So this image though is pretty good. I took this at my studio, and it's like I said, the anthillium. And there's a little bit of reflection on this that you're going to see. But this is a very interesting flower, Hawaiian flower, which I love Hawaiian flowers. I love that they have such strong shapes and they have such strong structure to them. I find that's a really fun thing to try to capture in my artwork. Keep fussing around with this because it's not, it keeps sort of falling into the grid up top. Okay, so I'm going to do a little sketch of this with this is just a Prismacolor turquoise. This is I think it's an F. Okay, it's an F pencil, so not too dark, not too light. And I'm going to just sketch this kind of out here. And using, again, sort of the macro view of it. Actually, I think I'm going to take this up just a little bit here because I can't see my pad. Oops.
Deborah, I kind of missed how you use the alcohol at
Oh, I
some
haven't
point.
done it yet. Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah,
haven't
you're going to go over that? Okay.
Yeah, I haven't done it yet.
No wonder I missed it.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, here we go. So I'm just going to sketch this out, and I'm looking at these big, beautiful heart shapes, and I'm sort of just going to try to follow that a little bit, and I'll move this up so you can see my sketch, but it's going to be pretty light. And I don't know, you guys probably have different mediums that you use and different work that you do, but one of the ways, that you can become a stronger artist is to have sort of a practice of
Sketchbook.
sketching, have a sketchbook and you're doing daily sketching of just things around you or things that interest you that you like to do. And it doesn't have to be like a big deal. It can just be kind of a quick one of your husband.
How do you plan your background, or do you wait till you said you work all over? Do you plan your background at this stage as it's going to be
the background colors I'm going to use?
Just like if it's going to be abstract, do you think about that in this process, or does that come later?
Well, no, I mean, to some extent, but sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just, you know, typically what it is it's a process of kind of using a photo or an image as the beginning. And then as I go, I'll change a lot of stuff
Mhm.
as I go because it's not working or I don't like it or it's too busy, something like that, you know?
Right.
So right now I'm just kind of working with the positive shapes. And you know, this is really fun because like I said, it has all this like heart shaped movement within it that is really interesting to me. And and I I uh I really enjoy that and the leaves too. And this is again just a rough sketch. So you can do a lot of correcting. You know, it shouldn't be something that you're going to be thinking of as too precious or just it has to be just right or I'm not going to or
Okay.
I'm going to fail the exercise. That's not really the point at all. So you just kind of want to get it going, you know, and it doesn't have to be perfect. We're just kind of sizing this out. And there's a lot of really fun sort of negative spaces that are happening naturally that I like. And there's a lot of fun. The reds and greens are really fun. I did another one of these for the George O'Keeffe Museum. We did a red flower sort of for the holidays.
We're about 25 minutes left.
Oh, okay. Well, I better hurry up. Okay. So anyway, so there you kind of see what I've done. And I'm just kind of outlining the little, you know, stamen parts here and here. There's texture on these, but I'm not going to really worry about that too much right now. They have a lot of these lines that are very cool. And what you want to do though is I'm just kind of drawing them in, but you're going to look sort of beyond that right now to what exactly is happening with the tonal values and the color behind these, because you're going to put this on later.
So you map out your darks and lights and your color changes on. I do this in watercolor is because you have to
Okay.
show the whites. So
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to go, you know, back
you,
in.
you don't necessarily work dark to or light to dark, do you?
No, I usually work the opposite.
Opposite.
Yeah. Because I don't want to have my whites set up and then put a lot of dark colors around them that are going to smear and get in the way.
But you
That
don't
means
really put white on top of a dark green to get a white.
you can, yeah, you can. I mean, pastels really help with the layering, but yeah, I mean, I try to be very conscious of keeping my colors clean while I'm working. But you know, it's a challenge. So, you know, you want to start out doing it in this perfect way, but a lot of times, you know, you're like, well, I want to go back and clean up that area, do something else. You know what I mean?
You erase some to get back to if you didn't like the
You mean
green color.
the line work?
No, I mean once you start on the pastel, it can you back it up some?
You can kind of lift it up a little bit, and lift it off, you know, you
Yeah,
can,
yeah,
or like draw over it, you know, but
yeah.
again, not, you might have maybe 3 passes on it before it gets to be the tooth is too full and can't take any more. So
Gotcha.
you want to, you know, you want to kind of uh, think about that as you go. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is a little faster here. I'm going to start adding my color in, and I'm going to do this really rough and not particularly beautifully, just start to get that color in there. And this one, whoops. And if you make your lines too dark, you can always go back and use a kneaded eraser to knock it off a little bit. These lines in here might be just a little bit too dark, so I can go back and
Do they show through? Is that
they can show through. Yeah, especially, you know, if you're going to work on light flowers or imagery, you know, this is a pretty dark one, so I don't have to worry about it too much. But you can just knock that back a little bit with your kneaded eraser, or you can use a white one too. Now I've got some powder there, but that's not really going to be a problem later. Okay, so I'm going to go and I'm going to go up into this area first, so I'm not dragging my hand through this. And
Have fun. Anytime.
Yeah, so I'm going to use this green, and this green here is sort of a mid-tone green.
Hello.
Of course.
Any questions?
No, I'm sorry, I got it.
Okay, so this is kind of a mid-tone green. It's a little bit yellow, but that's okay. I can go back over that and get it just right. So I'm just going to kind of fill in here, this area here, and in my little lines, just kind of get that color on there. And I'm going to do this for a few, let's see here. I have sort of this white, a white area here. I'm
Yes.
just sketching.
Oh.
Okay, so I'm going to go kind of off in here. These are separate leaves, but they're kind of similar in their color. One here, and probably this one here. Okay. See, I'm just kind of filling in the lines, and I'll use some darker greens on some of the other areas that are darker. And I'm going to take my brush, just dip it in alcohol, real
Now, is
easy.
that just any kind of alcohol, or is it?
It's just like rubbing alcohol, the kind you buy at the drugstore.
70%, doesn't matter if it's 70% or whatever.
Yeah. And the thing that's nice about this is it's going to dry real fast. And so you can see here that this is going to put a little layer of pastel on here that is going to make it a little easier for me to fill this space in and begin to put my layers of color on. See how nice that is?
Yeah.
So
Does that knock all the dust down?
it's just, yeah, and it fills the tooth out. I mean, it fills the color out kind of evenly without filling up the tooth on the paper.
Gotcha.
So that's why it's kind of a little bit of a shortcut and a little bit cleaner to do for your background. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just getting this kind of down. So it is a background wash. And a lot of times, artists will do this for all kinds of different oil paints, and they'll do a background wash of color. And this one I can even just pull through around this heart shape here.
On that Kitty Wallace paper, I've painted it with watercolor and acrylic,
Okay.
but it's a much heavier paper.
Okay, and then I'm going to have a little bit of a darker green here, and I'm going to fill that in, and a little bit over here, and a little bit over here. Okay, so I'm doing kind of the greens. So rough shapes, right? It doesn't have to be perfect at all. And then I'm going to fill in big areas here with my pink red. A little darker red over here.
So are you working in mid-tones?
Yeah, pretty much. I am. Yeah. Okay, see, just really getting this down. And then this is another flower here. Or I don't know if it's actually a flower, but it's.
Yeah, are they flowers or are they leaves?
I don't, yeah, it's kind of a funny plant.
What has the middle thing? This, what is it? The stamen?
Yeah, it does like a stamen. Yeah, it's kind of like a calla lily, only in color.
In shiny.
And shiny, yeah, it has the
color.
shininess to it. That's really fun. And then this one over to the side here is actually a richer red. And so I'm gonna break that off and then go in here And this has some green at the top of it, which is very cool. And so again, taking the brush, I'll take a broader brush to this side over here and just hit that. And I'm working, I'm working really quickly. I'm not worrying too much about the detail right now. You can just see though how beautiful the color is on this.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, and these are Art Spectrum is the name of this one. And it's a little bit of a harder soft pastel. So I use it kind of in the beginning of a piece. But it has really, the reds are especially really, really beautiful. So I always use them for my reds and oranges. It's funny how some colors, some brands will have really beautiful reds and some will have really beautiful, blues. It's interesting how they'll have these different strengths, So I'm leaving some of this light area here where the little stamen is, because that's like a really bright color. There's a little bit of this red in here. I'm just going to put in. And then over here, this is the same.
Does your alcohol have to be changed? Does it get dirty like water?
Well, typically I try to watch the colors and do the dark, first. This one, the reds and the greens are kind of similar in their values. So it doesn't matter too much. Sometimes though you might have to. I don't do a lot of the background washes with the white or lighter colors as much, just because again it's the dust of the dark colors that can kind of get you into trouble when you're trying to keep your colors clean with pastels. But I can go in and you can see this is really fast. Like this part here is almost dry already. So that's really nice. I don't have to worry too much about it drying, and I can go right ahead and
No
start
wait time.
working on it. Yeah.
Typically, how long do you work on a one of your bigger paintings?
A big painting will probably take me about a month.
Oh, wow.
I don't work on it just one though. I work on several at a time usually, because I like to have the back and forth of working on another piece. I have a big studio, so I have space to do that. I'm really lucky. And then it gives you a breather, because sometimes you can work on a piece and it gets to be really like, wow, this is hard. I gotta take a break. Usually I think that about
Tired of this thing.
at some point I'm like, wow, could you have picked a harder thing to do? Maybe.
You ever like switch over from flowers to something totally different just to get away from flowers for a minute?
Well, I do still lifes a lot of times for classes, and those are fun. And it depends on the weather. Sometimes I might go outside and do some sketches too, just to kind of get away from working to do heavy duty on something. Okay, so I've got kind of my underpainting here, and I'm just going to put in some of these little stamen shapes. I got this real bright stuff here because I'm going to go back in and put a lot of detail. And this one here is a little bit more yellow. But you can see here, this has got a lot of strong shapes to it already, which is great. And it's going to have some strong color too. I'll probably put in a background color. I might use like a blue or something just to kind of start sometimes, you think, ooh, this is a little too dark. I don't know what is that.
You push your colors a lot, changing the actual color to something brighter or duller than what you're looking at.
Yeah, I usually add more color to it, and I even will do some that have like fluorescence.
Uh-huh.
Use a little bit of fluorescence like on the inside. This is a little too dark. I don't really like this color. Okay, that was a mistake. Trying to find it. I didn't really bring a light blue, which is what I'm looking for. Hmm. Well, we'll worry about that in a little bit. We'll go over that. This is another leaf here. Okay, so I've got another leaf up here. I'm going to put that shape in. Yeah, so the fluorescents are really fun to use when you look at the like what light is getting hit and how to emphasize that. Of course, you don't want to use too much because then it gets to be a little bit weird. But I love to use them just as tiny hints of color. Okay,
Fun little
so
sparkles.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Fun little sparkles.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so when we got this here, I'm going to start to go back in a little bit and work on, let's see, what am I going to start with here? I think what I'll do is work on this piece, and you can see how you can apply some of the lighter green to this, because this got a little dark up in here and there's actually a lot of green. So I can just take my pastel and go over this just gently and start to add a little bit more green in there. And then using my finger, I can start to blend it in. And this one is going to have, again, those little kind of striations on it. And what you want to do with the pastels at this point is to kind of even out some of these areas. This is kind of a washy look. So I'm going to go back in and kind of deepen that. And I'm starting to make these shapes a little here.
Oh, the veining.
The veining, exactly, the veining. And think of always like what your lights and your shadows are doing. Because of course, that's how you make something look really alive, is using those shadows and highlights. So I'm kind of rushing ahead a little bit here. I know we're running out of time a bit, but like this is a big highlight right here on this leaf that I'm going to just
You put
show.
your light right over the top of that dark.
Yeah, and see, that's the wonderful part about doing the wash, is that this is still giving you like a pretty solid surface to do that. You're not like totally enmeshed in another pastel color that you can't do that. So it just is very helpful for
There's a tooth still there.
yeah, the tooth is still there to hold it, right? So that's really important to keeping getting the different layers of color on. And then there's like a little bit of blue. I use blue a lot as a highlight because it adds a lot of kind of sparkle to the piece instead of just white. Instead of just white or just black, think about doing things with a little bit more color, like black can be a kind of deadening, a lot of times. So you want to try to do maybe a purple, or for the white, for a highlight, use, a blue, a cool blue, or a cool yellow,
So you're just looking for the value.
Right, and also cool versus warm, and think about how that's relating to your piece. So you can see here, I'm putting this veining in, and it's starting to come through.
So it's cool on your warm red.
Yeah. So I like to use cool colors a lot, cool highlight colors, and then warm warm shadows, because it's a little more interesting. Okay. Now with the pencils, I'll go into a pencil here and show you a little bit with these. Oops.
You're good.
Okay.
Didn't knock it too far.
So I'm kind of through with my wash right now. So you can see that it was just something I did pretty quickly, just to kind of, again, give me that
And you
rope.
don't usually use it again during the
No, I won't use it again.
top of
That's
it,
kind
of a wash?
Yeah, we're just gonna go ahead and go into the pastels and the pencils now. And in here, I've got like a strong shape right here I'm gonna put in. And then I'm gonna go back in and start defining this leaf over here a little bit. It's getting lost now, but I want to put this shape in. And then you can see here, I can go back over it and put this shape in. And this has a green edge, and then it blends into a deeper green. And you can see here, I'm doing that, and then the deeper green is going to be over here. And you have kind of a sharper edge that's going to happen there. And you see this is going to blend really nicely into that other green.
And you just use your finger.
Yeah, I'm just using my finger right now. And then I'm kind of concentrating on this because I know we're running out of time, so I'll just show you. And then what I can do is go back in with my pencil, and I can make this line here a little sharper.
Yeah.
See? And
Yeah.
that's how you start adding some of that detail back in. And then I'm getting a little dust, so I'm going to tap this off. See, especially with the darker colors, you start getting that dust, and then it starts getting into the beautiful red. So you want to make sure that you keep that under control.
And when you tap it off, it doesn't fall into your other colors.
Well, you kind of lean it over a little bit, so
Okay.
tap it a little bit like that,
I gotcha. Upside
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah.
Could you, we only have about 5 more minutes. Could you talk a little bit about the framing aspect of pastel?
Yes, I will. And I'm sorry that I wasn't able
No,
to
no,
go
no, it's okay.
with you guys.
This is-
Yes. So
see
with the
all the-
framing, this is an example of a piece of acrylic that I have. So this would be used to frame this, perhaps with a small mat, or you don't have to do a mat with pastels either. But you can see here on the side, this is called I think it's called Econospace. And this is a piece of plastic. It's a little tube, and it's hollow here. And what you do is you have, there's an adhesive on one side of it, and you can cut this to fit your acrylic, and you can buy this like in long sticks, and then just cut it with an X-Acto knife or a sharper tool, and then you can peel this right off. See?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you want to press that onto the acrylic edge. And the spacers really, really help with the framing for a pastel, because what happens is this acrylic is never going to actually touch your artwork. You have this spacer, and it's almost like you would call, like a box, like and
Shadow box.
on top, and it's not touching. There's a space between here, so your artwork is never going to flatten up against this. And that's really important. You don't want to put something down on your pastel even after you fixed it, because there's always a little bit of a problem with the dust that you have to
always fix it.
keep in mind. Pardon me?
You always fix it.
I always at least give it a light fix. Yeah. So, because especially with these darker areas, you've got a lot of pigment on there that's gonna, that could, get on your glass or acrylic and mess it up.
Do they not? What I was told when I did pastels before was do a reverse cut on the mat, and then spacer was between the mat and the thing. They don't do it that way anymore.
Yeah, you could do it that way. A lot of pastel artists are not using mats currently. I think it's because of the constant problem of it getting
Yeah,
dusty,
yeah.
especially if it's a darker piece. So on my big pieces, I don't use mats anymore, and it really works out wonderfully. But I
This
do use the
all fit
spacer.
in the framing, underneath the framing.
Say
The
that again.
the little spacers fit underneath the frame so you don't see
Exactly.
them.
Exactly. Yeah. So you would have this sit right on top of the artwork, and then the frame goes over the whole thing.
Yeah.
So you just want to make sure that when you get a frame, it has a little bit of depth to it, that you have room to do that.
Do these spacers come in different depths or?
Yes, they do. Yeah, they do.
And where do you get those?
You can look, I think, I've got it on here. This one is from United Manufacturers. If you just look at the Akana spacers or framing spacers, it'll come up. And
Okay.
they have black ones, white ones, and clear ones. And actually, I really love to use the black ones because then you don't see any dust at all.
This is very cool. So much better than the other.
Yeah, it's very cool. And yeah,
When you
so that
transport them, you said, but just to reiterate, never, always flat, never upside down.
say that never flat when you
When you're transporting them, you always keep them flat.
yes,
Yeah.
and you keep them right side up. You don't want to ever transport them down and like have your car shaking them and stuff. It's a real talent to work with pastels after they've been framed and try to make sure that they stay their beautiful selves. So
Yeah.
I've worked on a lot of different ways, but I think I have it down now. So I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, they can be a little difficult.
Very challenging, definitely. Very challenging.
Deborah, this was very, very eye-opening. I am have not done pastels in a long time, and it seems that things have gotten more modern and easier.
Yeah, it really has. And I think the papers, the pencils, having different tools is really helped with pastels quite a bit. I remember doing pastels originally on like Stratford paper, and it didn't have much tooth, and the colors would kind of slide around. And so it's really been wonderful these past few years working with the different sorts of papers and things.
And
So
then for
go ahead.
you art, it was you art.
You are
You art pastels, and you use a 25. Oh no, you use the 800 grade.
I use the 800, but it comes in grades from I think 260 on up. I think 800 is the finest.
Okay.
And again, I think they have like a sample pack at Dakota Pastels that you can purchase, and that way you could try it out. So that works nicely too. I use 6 and I use 800. This one is 800. And you can buy the boards or you can buy paper. It just depends on what I like working on a stiff surface. So but they have boards that are, great. And it's just like any medium, you want to it's an investment, but you definitely get a lot more out of it if you have nice supplies.
Yeah. Use the best you can afford.
Absolutely, because really it will help your artwork so much.
Does anybody have any questions before I sign off here on the recording?
So, and also what I'll do is when I finish this, I'll send it to you. So you can
Excellent. Yes, I was going to ask
the
you.
finished piece because I didn't get as far as I wanted. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
And if anybody's ever interested, the Georgia O'Keeffe classes are ongoing. They're very reasonable. They have a sliding scale for the cost of them, and they're very fun. I do one a month, and we do different subject matter. And it's about 2 hours. I have students come all over the world to take those.
Down in Taos.
Yeah, well, I teach online. So there's Zoom classes. Yeah. So just go on to Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, and they have all kinds of classes, but the pastels, like I said, I do one a month. And then we pick different subject matter. I pick different subjects to do. So I have a Hawaiian flower coming up in February.
Is there a particular day, like the second Tuesday or whatever, that you do those classes?
No,
or-
but if you go to the